The morning of April 8, 1943, began with an almost serene clarity 27,000 feet above the occupied French countryside near Caen. Through the crystalline canopy of his Focke-Wulf 190A-5, Oberleutnant Ralph Hermican, a veteran ace of Jageschwader 26, watched the awkward, heavy silhouettes ascending toward a formation. Even his oxygen mask could not entirely conceal the smirk of professional disdain. The American fighters, making their combat debut over occupied Europe, appeared almost comical to the seasoned German pilots. "The enemy armies have sent us flying milk bottles," Hermican transmitted to his wingman, unable to suppress his audible laughter at the sight of the massive Republic P-47 Thunderbolts struggling laboriously for altitude. Below them, 16 P-47C Thunderbolts of the 4th Fighter Group labored upward in a tight, lumbering formation. To German airmen accustomed to the sleek lines of the Spitfire or the nimble Soviet interceptors, these corpulent American machines were baffling. Barrel-shaped fuselages topped with greenhouse canopies, undersized wings, and massive propellers that dwarfed anything in the Luftwaffe's inventory. Their 7-ton mass, driven by the straining 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R 2800 double Wasp engines, made the climb agonizingly slow. What Hermican and the other German pilots circling like predatory wolves could not possibly have known was that they were witnessing the arrival of the weapon destined to systematically dismantle the Luftwaffe's fighter arm. Within 18 months, these derided flying milk bottles would be transformed from objects of mockery into instruments of sheer terror. The mathematics of destruction were already loaded into those broad wings. 3,400 rounds of ammunition feeding 8.50 caliber Browning machine guns, yielding a combined rate of fire exceeding 6,000 rounds per minute, enough concentrated firepower to cleave a Messerschmitt in half in less than 2 seconds. The transformation began that very April morning when Major Donald Blakesley, commanding the 335th Fighter Squadron, spotted the German formation positioning for the attack. As a former Eagle Squadron veteran who had recently transferred from flying nimble RAF Spitfires, Blakesley possessed a vital understanding his men lacked. Survival in the P-47 required abandoning every conventional tenet of air combat. The Thunderbolt represented a radical departure from established fighter design philosophy. While the Germans had pursued lightweight interceptors optimized for climb rate and turning performance, Republic Aviation had engineered an unprecedented high-altitude juggernaut. This machine redefined the rules of aerial warfare, relying not on agility, but on sheer mass, overwhelming power, and devastating firepower. Spread across the French sky that day were 56 American pilots, many of whom would eventually become legendary aces whose names would instill genuine fear into the hearts of Luftwaffe pilots. But on April 8, 1943, they were simply novices, flying an untested machine into a deadly confrontation with the most experienced fighter force in the world. The Axis powers had been engaged in continuous, brutal warfare since 1939, fielding veterans from the campaigns in Poland, France, Britain, and the Soviet Union. In sharp contrast, the Americans had logged precisely 0 days in direct combat. The narrative of the air war would soon shift decisively, demonstrating how industrial logic inevitably defeated tactical brilliance, how the merger of sheer quantity with engineering quality forged an overwhelming superiority. German pilots, accustomed to aerial dominance, soon discovered the chilling reality as their laughter turned to terror, witnessing firsthand what synchronized Browning machine guns could inflict on an aircraft at 400 yards. This transformation began with the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, born from the urgent panic of June 1940. As Messerschmitt swept unchecked across the skies of France, Alexander Kartveli, Republic Aviation's Georgian-born chief designer, received immediate specifications from the U.S. Army Air Force. They required a high-altitude interceptor capable of matching the Luftwaffe's finest. Kartveli delivered something far beyond the brief, a mechanical monster that redefined the limits of possibility. "It will be a dinosaur," Kartveli admitted to his apprehensive design team, "but it will be a dinosaur with good proportions." The ensuing XP-47B prototype, which achieved its maiden flight on May 6, 1941, astonished all observers. Weighing in at 9,900 pounds empty, it was a staggering 65% heavier than its predecessor, the P-43 Lancer. Its immense profile was dominated by the complex ducting of the massive turbo supercharger system, which ran to the rear fuselage, giving the airframe an almost pregnant appearance. Test pilots, approaching the machine for the first time, inevitably posed the same skeptical question. This thing actually flies? It did not just fly, it dominated the high altitudes. The heart of this dominance was a Pratt & Whitney R 2800 double Wasp engine, an 18-cylinder radial producing 2,000 horsepower, capable of maintaining peak output at 27,000 feet, an altitude where conventional German fighters choked and gasped for air. This revolutionary turbo supercharger, powered by exhaust gases, effectively delivered sea-level performance in the stratosphere, where the atmosphere was too thin for standard systems. Yet, mastery of this Leviathan was costly. Major Huber Hub Zemke, commanding the 56 Fighter Group training at Bridgeport, Connecticut, initially held the aircraft in deep contempt. Between September 1942 and January 1943, his unit tragically lost 18 pilots and 41 aircraft in training accidents alone. The P-47, in its challenging infancy, killed more Americans during training than the Germans would in the initial months of combat. It was notoriously unforgiving, prone to ground loops on landing, torque rolls on takeoff, and diving with such dangerous enthusiasm that pilots discovered the phenomenon of compressibility, finding their control surfaces frozen as shock waves formed across the wings. But those pilots who survived the learning curve unlocked its extraordinary potential. Lieutenant Robert Johnson, a farm boy from Oklahoma who would become one of America's top aces with 27 victories, famously described his first experience. It was like strapping yourself to a locomotive. The power was unbelievable. You didn't fly it, you aimed it. The initial combat encounters in April and May 1943, however, seemed only to confirm every German prejudice. The P-47 could not turn with the Focke-Wulf 190s, nor could it match the nimble climb rate of the Messerschmitt 109s. Luftwaffe pilots swiftly capitalized on the initial deficiencies of the P-47 Thunderbolt, particularly its sluggish handling at medium altitudes. They quickly developed specialized tactics to exploit these weaknesses, often attacking from below where the heavy American fighters struggled to maneuver, forcing turning engagements where intrinsic agility proved superior to sheer firepower. The early assessments from the German side were scathing. Hutchman Isef Pips Priller, the commanding officer of Jageschwader 26, famously reported at headquarters after his first encounter. The new American fighter is meat for the slaughter. It flies like a truck, turns like a freight train, and climbs like a pregnant cow. German airmen quickly dubbed the P-47s Indiana, referring to them derisively as fat targets pretending to be warriors. The initial operational statistics appeared to validate this German confidence. During their first month of deployment, American fighter groups suffered a disproportionate loss ratio, sacrificing 14 Thunderbolts for only 3 confirmed German kills. The Royal Air Force, observing these early struggles from their highly agile Spitfire squadrons, quietly suggested that the Americans might need to reconsider their choice of primary fighter. British pilots, in fact, morbidly joked that the most effective evasive maneuver available to a P-47 pilot was simply to unstrap and run around the spacious cockpit. Yet, beneath the surface of these discouraging figures, a crucial and strained phenomenon was emerging, one that German intelligence fatally overlooked. The P-47s that were shot down consistently absorbed an almost unbelievable amount of punishment before succumbing. One particular aircraft, returning from a mission on May 4th, bore the scars of 21 heavy cannon holes and over 100 machine gun strikes, damage that would have utterly disintegrated a Messerschmitt or a Spitfire. The massive air-cooled radial engine, critically lacking vulnerable liquid coolant systems, shrugged off hits that would have instantly crippled a liquid-cooled fighter. Furthermore, when the Thunderbolts did manage to bring their guns to bear, the results were catastrophic. The P-47's weapons battery created a convergent zone of focused destruction unlike anything German pilots had previously encountered. Unlike the rifle-caliber armament of early war fighters or the cannon with severely limited ammunition, the American fighter could maintain sustained, heavy fire for over 30 seconds, an eternity in compressed chaos of aerial combat. German perceptions would finally begin to shift dramatically following a legendary engagement on June 26, 1943, over Lazo, France. The confrontation involved Second Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson of the 61st Fighter Squadron. Johnson's formation of 48 P-47s, returning from escort duty, was ambushed by 16 formidable Focke-Wulf 190s belonging to 2/Jagdgeschwader 26, led by headman Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland, the younger brother of the renowned Adolf Galland. The Germans executed a textbook attack, diving from a blinding glare of the sun with a devastating speed advantage. Johnson's Thunderbolt, positioned at the rear of the formation, was instantly caught in the crossfire of multiple attackers, sustaining catastrophic damage within the first few seconds of the fight. 20mm cannon shells exploded across his aircraft. The cockpit canopy violently shattered. Hydraulic fluid streamed across the instruments. The engine cowling was partially ripped away, and fire erupted immediately behind the instrument panel. Johnson, wounded by shrapnel and bullets impacting his nose and leg, a 20mm shell had detonated within the canopy track, welding the plexiglass shut, sealing Johnson inside a mortally wounded aircraft at 27,000 feet. What transpired next fundamentally redefined the limits of aerial combat damage tolerance. Despite an oil-slick windscreen that offered no forward visibility, an engine that vibrated violently, and flight controls that responded only through sheer will and intermittent connection, Johnson somehow managed to stabilize the machine, turning its nose toward the sanctuary of England. The P-47 Thunderbolt, functioning far beyond its design parameters, continued its sluggish flight, carrying damage that would have instantaneously reduced any lesser fighter to shattered debris. This impossible journey was interrupted. A lone Focke-Wulf 190, flown by an unidentified pilot from the formidable 2, Jagdgeschwader 26, 2/JG-26, spotted the crippled American fighter limping across the sky at barely 170 miles per hour. Historical inquiries have never conclusively identified the German pilot, though several candidates exist in the fragmented Luftwaffe combat reports from that day. What unfolded became one of the most extraordinary and stark encounters in the history of air-to-air combat. The German pilot expertly positioned himself astern Johnson's P-47 and unleashed a devastating barrage from his 4 20mm cannon and twin 13mm machine guns. Johnson, trapped and unable to execute any evasive maneuver, could only huddle behind the thick armor plating of his seat and await the inevitable. The heavily built Thunderbolt absorbed the entire cannon ammunition load, a torrent of high-explosive ordnance. The FW-190 repositioned and fired again, this time utilizing only the heavy machine guns. The cannon depleted, with his weapon silent, the German pilot pulled alongside the American wreck, staring in profound disbelief. Johnson clearly saw the face of his adversary, a young, blonde pilot whose expression rapidly cycled from aggressive confidence to confusion, and finally, to a visible form of shock. The German repositioned one last time, and emptied his remaining machine gun belts into the fuselage. Yet, the P-47 still flew. He drew alongside once more, shaking his head in obvious amazement, offered an informal, respectful salute, and peeled away, presumably having exhausted every round of ammunition. Johnson's P-47 finally touched down at RAF Manson, its engine seizing completely on the runway. The subsequent damage inspection was staggering. Crew chief ceased counting bullet holes after surpassing 200. One cannon shell had exploded mere inches from Johnson's head. Another had detonated against the steel armor plate protecting his spine. The engine cowling bore multiple direct hits. Control cables were partially severed, and critically, 3 of the 4 main longerons, the primary structural backbones of the fuselage, had been shot entirely through. The aircraft, against all physics, had delivered its pilot home. The survival of this single P-47 sent profound shockwaves through both opposing air forces. American engineers studying the catastrophic wreckage realized they had intrinsically underestimated the ruggedness of their own design. German intelligence, receiving the combat reports from 2/JG-26, initially dismissed them as fabricated. No fighter, they insisted, could withstand such punishment. But testimony from multiple pilots confirmed the impossible truth. The Thunderbolt had absorbed everything the Luftwaffe's premier fighter could deliver and survived. By July 1943, the operational success of the P-47 Thunderbolt hinged on American pilots mastering its unique kinetic attributes. Lieutenant Colonel Hubert Zena, the determined commander of the 56th Fighter Group, codified this doctrine through relentless, often costly trial and error. The fundamental realization was simple: abandon the traditional low-altitude turning dogfight. Instead, pilots were instructed to leverage the Thunderbolt's immense mass and engine power. This significant weight, initially criticized as a liability, was transformed into the aircraft's most potent weapon. In a vertical dive, the P-47 was unparalleled. No contemporary German fighter could match its terminal velocity. From an altitude of 30,000 feet, the Thunderbolt could achieve speeds exceeding 550 miles per hour, outpacing even the most streamlined Luftwaffe interceptors in a full-power dive. This tremendous speed was instantly convertible into altitude via a powerful zoom climb, leaving any pursuing enemy aircraft hopelessly disadvantaged below. This approach culminated in the development of the boom and zoom tactic, a doctrine pioneered by flyers like Captain Walker Bar Mahiran, who swiftly became one of the first American aces in the European theater, though pilots often refer to this devastating application of force as a Thunderbolt turkey shoot. Instead of engaging in the swirling chaos of traditional air combat, P-47 formations would ascend to 30,000 feet, positioning themselves above the effective operational ceiling of most German fighters. When Luftwaffe formations were spotted below, the Thunderbolts would seamlessly roll inverted and commit to an aggressive dive. The sheer speed attained made deflection shooting virtually impossible for the defending Germans. At the nadir of these punishing dives, the combined firepower of the American heavy machine guns would be unleashed. German pilots who survived these encounters universally described facing an impenetrable wall of lead. The concentrated .50 caliber barrage created an overwhelming zone of destruction. Enemy aircraft caught within this convergence pattern rarely merely fell. They were observed to disintegrate violently in midair. The true strategic revelation of this overwhelming American firepower manifested during the pivotal dual raid of August 17, 1943, targeting the crucial industrial complexes at Schweinfurt and Regensburg. This mission represented the deepest penetration into German airspace yet attempted, and it served to demonstrate both the critical limitations of the P-47, specifically its operational range, even when equipped with external drop tanks, and its terrifying effectiveness when the boom and zoom philosophy was rigorously applied. Major David Schilling, commanding the 62nd Fighter Squadron, encountered a specialized formation of Messerschmitt Me 110 destroyer aircraft. These twin-engine German heavy fighters, heavily armed with cannon and rocket armament, were the Luftwaffe's dedicated bomber killers, positioned to break up the vulnerable B-17 formations. Although robust, the Me-110s lacked the maneuverability of single-engine fighters. Schilling's flight of 4 Thunderbolts rolled into their attack dive from 28,000 feet. The sheer shock of the encounter was captured by surviving German personnel. Unteroffizier Heinrich Roth, a gunner in one of Me-110s, provided a chilling account during his subsequent POW interrogation. The American fighters came down like hammers from heaven. I opened fire at 800 meters. Good hits. I saw them strike the fighter's wing. The P-47 didn't even wobble. Then he fired. The aircraft ahead of us simply came apart. Not shot down, destroyed. Wings separated from the fuselage. The tail severed. The crew compartment shredded into metal confetti. In 2 seconds, a Me-110 became nothing. 8 Messerschmitt 110s were annihilated in less than 60 seconds. The German pilots had never before witnessed such concentrated, immediate destruction delivered from above. The raw destructive potential of the P-47 Thunderbolt resided in its formidable battery of 8.50 caliber machine guns. This array carried 425 rounds per gun, culminating in a total load of 3,400 rounds, weighing nearly 900 pounds. When configured for combat, the ballistic paths of all 8 weapons were meticulously set to intersect at a convergence distance, typically 300 yards. At this lethal zone, approximately 6 feet in diameter, the target was instantly subjected to a torrent of 100 projectiles every second, each traveling at a blistering 2,900 feet per second. This prodigious ammunition capacity underscored the revelation of American industrial might. While German fighter pilots often contended with meager cannon ammunition supplies, typically 120 to 200 rounds for a 20 millimeters weapon, American pilots possessed the sustained ability to maintain fire for over half a minute. The standard combat load was carefully calibrated, mixing armor-piercing incendiary tracer, and standard ball ammunition in specific patterns designed simultaneously to destroy structural integrity and trigger catastrophic ignition. Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabby Gabreski, who would ultimately secure his legacy as the top American ace in the European theater with 28 confirmed victories, vividly attested to the effect. He recalled that when a pilot unleashed the full force of all 8 guns, enemy aircraft did not merely descend, they violently exploded. Gabreski recounted witnessing a Messerschmitt Bf 109 literally cleaved in two, the tail section peeling away in one direction, while the nose and wings tumbled in the other, confirming that the pilot caught in that lethal stream never knew what struck him. By September 1943, the German Luftwaffe began to comprehend another terrifying capability of the Thunderbolt. Its performance improved dramatically at extreme altitudes, precisely where German fighters began to suffer terminal degradation. The P-47's turbo-supercharged double Wasp engine maintained its rated power output up to an astonishing 30,000 feet. In contrast, German fighters relying on single-stage or two-stage mechanical superchargers saw their effectiveness diminish markedly above 25,000 feet. This harsh reality claimed the life of Oberleutnant Hans Philipp, one of Germany's most successful aces with 206 victories, in a fatal encounter on October 8, 1943. Leading Jageschwader won against a B-17 formation at 28,000 feet over Bremen. Philipp discovered his Focke-Wulf 190A-6 was sluggish and unresponsive in the thin, high-altitude air. The powerful BMW 801 engine, dominant at medium altitudes, was now gasping for oxygen nearly 6 miles above the Earth. When P-47s of the veteran 56 Fighter Group dealt upon the German formation from 32,000 feet, the Focke-Wulfs were rendered effectively defenseless. Robert Johnson, then a rapidly ascending combat pilot on his path to A status, was flying at 31,000 feet when he sighted Philipp's distinctive FW-190. Identifiable by its elaborate nose art, Johnson's subsequent combat report was chillingly clinical. He recorded opening fire at 300 yards with a 30-degree deflection shot, observing immediate strikes along the entire length of the fuselage. The enemy aircraft exploded. No parachute was observed. Philipp's sudden death sent profound shock waves to the Luftwaffe command structure. If one of their finest, a man who had survived over 500 missions across both the Eastern and Western fronts, could not withstand the high-altitude capabilities of the Thunderbolt, then the survivability of average pilots was called into question. The German High Command immediately mandated an investigation into the P-47's performance envelope. The resulting report, delivered to Reichsmarshal Hermann Göring in November 1943, was starkly sobering. Operating at altitudes exceeding 42,000 feet, a domain well above the operational ceiling of most German interceptors, the P-47 Thunderbolt possessed a formidable baseline of survivability. Its legendary dive speed approached the sound barrier, while its structure was a fortress of integrated armor. A 3/8-inch steel plate shielded the pilot, complemented by a half-inch armored glass windscreen and specialized deflection plates around the engine block. Most critically, this rugged design granted the Thunderbolt a capacity to absorb damage that would instantly destroy 3 conventional fighters, yet still allow the machine and pilot to return safely. This inherent resilience reached its strategic zenith in January 1944, when a new variant, the P-47D-22, began arriving in England, completing its transformation from an early laughingstock to the Luftwaffe's nightmare. The D-22 featured a Hamilton Standard hydroatic propeller, equipped with 13-foot paddle blades of a broad core design that bit into the air like massive oars. The resulting improvement in climb rate was immediate and dramatic. Where earlier Thunderbolts had struggled, ascending an anemic 2,200 feet per minute at sea level, these paddle blade variants could achieve a powerful 3,000 feet per minute, thus matching or even exceeding the climb performance of German fighters across most operating altitudes. This massive propeller also significantly enhanced acceleration, allowing P-47s to build kinetic energy faster in level flight and maintain the advantage in vertical maneuvers. The shock of this sudden improvement was acutely felt by the German veterans. Headman Heinz Knoker of Jägerschwader 11, an experienced pilot with over 200 combat missions, encountered the new variants in February 1944 during a bomber interception near Hanover. He recorded his astonishment in his combat diary. "The fat American fighters have learned to climb. We bounced a formation near Hanover, expecting our usual advantage. They turned into us and climbed with us. When we tried to disengage, they followed us up to 30,000 feet. Schmidt was caught and blown apart. Nothing left but smoke and fragments. These are not the same machines we laughed at last year." The paddle blade propeller did more than transform performance. It altered the Thunderbolt's sonic signature. The distinctive, deep, thundering roar, created by the blade tips reaching near supersonic speeds, could be heard from miles away. German ground troops reported being able to identify approaching P-47 formations by sound alone, a deep, threatening rumble that signaled impending death from above, leading them to dub the aircraft the Donnerschlag or Thunderclap. By March 1944, P-47s, now routinely equipped with external fuel tanks, carrying either two 108-gallon wing tanks or a 75-gallon belly tank, could extend their operational range to over 1,000 miles, escorting bombers deep into German territory. With the paddle blade performance gains compensating for the added weight, Thunderbolts could drop their tanks and immediately engage on equal terms. The Luftwaffe strategy shifted to concentrating fire on the bombers, hoping to cripple the American daylight campaign. But this required penetrating the P-47 escort screen, an increasingly suicidal proposition that developed among German pilots a grudging respect that bordered on outright fear for the big American fighters. The pilot survived a harrowing aerial engagement with P-47 Thunderbolts on March 6, 1944, though he was left gravely wounded. He recounted the terrifying speed and destructive power of the American fighters in a post-war interview. "We saw them above us, fat silhouettes against the sun. Someone laughed and said, 'Here come the flying pigs.' Nobody was laughing 30 seconds later. They came down like an avalanche, faster than we could possibly react. The first pass destroyed 3 of our fighters, simply gone, transformed instantly into burning debris." He noted a crucial difference in armament. Their guns didn't fire in bursts like ours. They poured out solid streams of fire. Getting caught in that sustained fusillade meant instant death. Beyond sheer firepower, the escort missions revealed the P-47's superior operational endurance. While German fighters often had to operate at maximum power settings, rapidly consuming fuel, the massive American radial engines could cruise efficiently at high altitude. This allowed the Thunderbolts to remain with the bomber formations for hours, rotating top cover, while retaining adequate fuel reserves for combat and the long return journey. As the long-range escort duties were increasingly assumed by arriving P-51 Mustangs in the spring of 1944, P-47 units began to transition toward ground attack, a specialized role that would soon make them the most feared aircraft in the German arsenal. This transition began in earnest in April 1944 as the Allies finalized preparations for the invasion of France. The Thunderbolt's heavy battery of machine guns proved devastatingly effective against targets on the ground. Standard armor-piercing incendiary ammunition could penetrate the relatively thin top armor of most German vehicles, while the sheer volume of fire could obliterate soft targets in moments. A 2-second burst delivered 160 half-inch projectiles into a target area the size of a truck. However, it was the integration of bombs and rockets that truly transformed the P-47 into a potent multi-role monster. The D-25 variant could carry 2 1,000-pound bombs beneath the wings and a 500-pounder under the fuselage, a payload equivalent to many early war medium bombers. Later variants added zero-length rocket stubs for 10 5-inch high-velocity aircraft rockets, VARs, each delivering the destructive force of a 105 mm artillery shell. Oberst Hans von Luck, commanding the 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment during the Normandy campaign, experienced these devastating ground attacks firsthand. They came in low, so low you could see the pilots' faces, he recalled. The sound was terrifying. Engines roaring, rockets screaming. Then the hammer of those heavy machine guns. A column of our trucks simply ceased to exist. 20 vehicles transformed into burning wreckage in one pass. The psychological effect on the men was devastating. We called them J-bows, fighter-bombers, but these were something beyond that. They were flying artillery with the accuracy of snipers. By June 6, 1944, the Luftwaffe discovered how comprehensively the balance of power had shifted. Over 500 P-47s provided air cover for the invasion, establishing an impenetrable umbrella over the beaches. German fighters attempting to reach the landing zones were massacred in the skies, a fate that soon awaited pilots like Oberleutnant Wolfgang Fischer. The brutal reality of Allied air supremacy on D-Day was captured starkly in the words of German pilot Jagd Schade, one of only 3 Luftwaffe airmen, to successfully reach the invasion beaches that morning. He reported that the sky unequivocally belonged to the Americans. The P-47 Thunderbolts were stacked in layers, forming an impenetrable barrier from sea level up to 30,000 feet. His squadron's attempt to break through at dawn was suicidal. Of the 12 fighters that launched, he was the sole pilot to return. The P-47s, he recounted, were waiting at every altitude, making it impossible to climb above or die beneath the threat. Their coordinated heavy fire turned German aircraft into a descending torrent of aluminum rain. In the critical weeks immediately following the landings, the P-47s of the 9th Air Force systematically eradicated German movement during daylight hours. The resulting statistics were staggering evidence of the Wehrmacht's crippled mobility. In June alone, Thunderbolt pilots claimed the destruction of 651 locomotives, 3,847 trucks, 512 tanks and armor vehicles, alongside an astonishing 4,553 horse-drawn supply vehicles. This relentless campaign forced the Wehrmacht to attempt resupply and troop movements exclusively under the cover of night, critically hampering their capacity to respond effectively to the rapid Allied advances. Desperate, the Germans tried every conceivable method to neutralize the Thunderbolt threat. They reinforced vehicle armor, saturated key routes with increased anti-aircraft deployments, and developed sophisticated new camouflage techniques. Yet, nothing proved effective. The P-47's unique combination of raw speed, unparalleled armor plating, and devastating firepower rendered it nearly unstoppable. Even the feared 88mm flak guns, the backbone of German anti-air defense, struggled significantly to track these fast-moving fighters during their low-altitude strafing runs. While the P-47 was devastating the European continent, it was simultaneously proving its exceptional worth in the vast and challenging Pacific theater. Operating from New Guinea, the 348 Fighter Group quickly discovered that the Thunderbolt's rugged qualities were perfectly suited to the immense distances and punishing tropical conditions of the island war. Colonel Neil Kirby, commanding the 348, pioneered specific tactics adapted for the Pacific environment. On October 11, 1943, Kirby personally led just 4 P-47s into a fray against an overwhelming force of 40 Japanese aircraft over Wewak, achieving a stunning victory by personally shooting down 6 enemy planes in that single mission, an achievement that earned him the Medal of Honor. The Japanese, accustomed to engaging nimble but often fragile American fighters, were wholly unprepared for the P-47's combination of firepower and sheer durability. Famed Japanese Eisaburo Sakai, who encountered the Thunderbolts over New Guinea, later provided a telling account, writing, "We called them monsters. Our 20mm cannon, which could destroy a P-40 with a few hits, seemed to have no effect. I put dozens of rounds into one Thunderbolt and watched it fly away." He noted further that the American return fire was terrifying, describing streams of heavy bullets that tore aircraft apart. To meet the extreme demands of the Pacific War, the P-47N variant was specifically developed, featuring increased fuel capacity thanks to wet wings holding 93 gallons of fuel each. This crucial modification extended the fighter's operational range to 2,350 miles. This long-range evolution meant the P-47N could effectively escort B-29s all the way to the Japanese home islands, proving that the short-legged fighter in 1943 had transformed into a true long-range weapon. Perhaps the ultimate vindication of the P-47's rapid evolution came in its encounters with the German jet fighters. The Messerschmitt Me-262, with its top speed of 540 miles per hour, should have been untouchable by any propeller-driven aircraft. The raw speed differential initially favored the German jets, yet P-47 Thunderbolt pilots soon recognized that the Messerschmitt Me-262 was critically vulnerable during the low-energy phases of takeoff and landing, and, crucially, during high-speed vertical intercepts from altitude. This aggressive approach yielded results on November 27, 1944, when Lieutenant Colonel John C. Muir of the 352nd Fighter Group achieved one of the first confirmed P-47 kills against a revolutionary jet. Diving from a staggering 28,000 feet, Muir's Thunderbolt reached speeds approaching 500 miles per hour, briefly matching the jet's velocity in level flight. The unsuspecting German pilot, confident in his inherent speed advantage, never registered the diving P-47 until Muir's concentrated fire erupted at 400 yards. Muir's combat report was devastatingly clear. The enemy aircraft disintegrated under fire. Large pieces, including both engines, separated from the fuselage. The pilot did not escape. The combined, concentrated fire of 8.50 caliber guns proved far more effective against the jet airframe than Allied planners had initially anticipated. To meet the escalating threat, specialized P-47M variants were rushed into deployment by early 1945, specifically engineered to counter both German jets and the V-1 flying bombs. Utilizing water methanol injection, these ultimate Thunderbolts boosted engine power to an immense 2,800 horsepower, and thanks to refined aerodynamics, could sustain 470 miles per hour in level flight at 30,000 feet, fast enough to intercept jets under certain conditions. Nevertheless, many veteran pilots still emphasize firepower over pure speed. Major George Boswick, commanding the 63rd Fighter Squadron, successfully shot down two Me-262s in March 1945. His subsequent tactical report underscored the jet's fundamental weakness. The jets are faster, but they can't turn and they can't take punishment. He concluded that the Me-262s were forced to slow down to attack Allied bomber formations, providing a decisive window for the P-47s to exploit their superior maneuverability and devastating gun battery. The ultimate demonstration of American industrial might versus the Luftwaffe's dwindling manpower arrived on January 1, 1945, during Operation Bodenplatte. The German Air Force's desperate, final attempt to cripple Allied air superiority. Nearly 900 German fighters, including their best remaining pilots, launched coordinated surprise attacks against Allied airfields across Belgium and the Netherlands. At Y-34 Airfield near Metz, the home base of the 365th Fighter Group's P-47s, the initial assault achieved partial success, destroying 22 Thunderbolts on the ground along with several other aircraft. A captured German pilot, brought to the command post to witness the wreckage, pointed at the burning aircraft and taunted his captors. "What do you think of that?" Major George Brooking's legendary response, circulated widely throughout the 9th Air Force, cut directly to the core strategic reality. He pointed to the flight line where ground crews were already clearing debris and preparing hard stands for replacements. "By tomorrow, we'll have 40 new ones. How long will it take you to replace your pilots?" The German pilot's smirk instantly vanished. Within 48 hours, factory-fresh P-47D-40S, flown in rapidly from depots in England, filled the empty flight line. Operation Bodenplatte failed catastrophically for the Luftwaffe, which lost 271 aircraft and, far more critically, 213 irreplaceable veteran pilots. While the Luftwaffe struggled to absorb the devastating loss of experienced instructors and seasoned squadron leaders, personnel who were truly irreplaceable, the American losses of 134 aircraft across all attacked airfields were merely a statistical footnote, with every machine replaced within a single week. The sheer mathematics of industrial output signaled the inevitable defeat of the Third Reich. At the heart of this overwhelming material advantage lay the P-47 Thunderbolt. Republic Aviation alone manufactured 15,683 of these formidable fighters during the war, a production total surpassing any other American fighter type. The factory lines operated with relentless, clockwork precision. The massive Farmingdale factory on Long Island achieved the impossible, completing one heavy Thunderbolt every hour around the clock. Meanwhile, the Evansville plant in Indiana, erected from empty farmland in 1942, was contributing over 500 aircraft monthly by 1944. To construct a single P-47D required the meticulous assembly of 65,000 individual parts, incorporating 8 miles of electrical wiring, 2,000 pounds of aluminum, and 300 pounds of rubber. The complex engine alone contained 2,400 individual components machined to tolerances measured in 1,000th of an inch. Yet, the American workforce, many of them women who had never seen an aircraft prior to Pearl Harbor, assembled these intricate machines with precision that frequently exceeded typical peacetime standards. The logistical scale of ammunition production was equally staggering. Each P-47 combat sortie demanded 3,400 rounds of .50 caliber ammunition, and with hundreds of Thunderbolts flying daily missions, consumption surged past 10 million rounds per month by mid-1944. To meet this insatiable demand, facilities like the Lake City Arsenal in Missouri were producing 30 million rounds monthly. Each cartridge manufactured at tolerances measured in 10,000ths of an inch to ensure flawless, reliable feeding through the synchronized gun mechanisms. The fuel requirements were colossal. A single Thunderbolt consumed 100 gallons per hour in normal flight, escalating to 300 gallons hourly during combat maneuvers with water injection engaged. By late 1944, the 9th Air Force alone required over 25 million gallons of high-octane aviation fuel every month, all of it reliably shipped across the treacherous Atlantic in tankers that were, themselves, a testament to American mass production efficiency. Even more decisive than the output of planes was the output of personnel. By 1944, the United States was graduating an astonishing 30,000 pilots annually from advanced training programs. A figure greater than Germany had managed to train throughout the entire conflict. Each P-47 pilot received a minimum of 400 hours of flight instruction before entering the combat theater, including 100 hours dedicated specifically to advanced fighters. German pilots, by contrast, were often entering combat with less than 100 total flight hours by the war's end. This qualitative difference manifested dramatically in combat. American airmen arrived in Europe thoroughly versed in complex formation flying, instrument navigation, advanced gunnery, and tactical maneuvering. They had practiced extensively against captured German aircraft, giving them a detailed understanding of their enemy's capabilities and limitations. Crucially, they possessed an intimate knowledge of their own aircraft systems, having studied technical manuals rarely, if ever, seen by their German counterparts. Lieutenant Eugene Roberts, arriving in England in September 1944, embodied the profound and comprehensive advantage provided by the American training pipeline. The American pilot entered combat equipped with the unparalleled advantage of systematic, rigorous preparation. Logbooks detailing 420 flight hours, including 75 dedicated specifically to the P-47 Thunderbolt, attested to a level of training the enemy could no longer afford. Having perfected deflection shooting against towed targets and meticulously analyzed gun camera footage from previous engagements, the new arrival understood the mechanics of aerial warfare intrinsically. The ensuing encounter was often decided before the throttle was advanced. The disparity in readiness meant the opposing German pilot likely possessed barely half the experience, rendering the fight fundamentally unequal. By March 1945, this crushing reality had fully penetrated the German high command. Oberleutnant Joseph Priller, the very pilot who had derisively dismissed the P-47 as a pregnant cow just 2 years prior, was interviewed by propaganda officials desperate to maintain morale. His candid statement, ultimately deemed too demoralizing for public release, documented the complete transformation of German attitudes toward the Allied threat. Priller declared the Thunderbolt the best fighter bomber ever built, citing its unprecedented firepower, delivered by weapons that never jam, never overheat, never run out of ammunition in normal combat. He emphasized its versatility, carrying bombs equivalent to a medium bomber, firing rockets with the saturation of artillery, and fighting like a dedicated pursuit aircraft when necessary. Yet, Priller understood the terror extended beyond the machine itself. It represented the staggering, virtually unlimited capacity of American industrial production. They lose 10. They build 20, he lamented. We lose one. It is gone forever. American pilots arrived better trained than German instructors, possessing the necessary fuel for extensive training, ammunition for practice, and spare parts for every component. We have nothing but courage, Priller concluded, and courage without resources is merely delayed defeat. We laughed at them in 1943. We are not laughing now. When the Germans heard the distinct mechanical sound of the Thunderbolt's guns, they knew death had arrived. Precise, unstoppable, and overwhelming. They were not beaten by better tactics or braver pilots, but buried beneath an avalanche of steel and lead. By April 1945, the Luftwaffe existed largely as a bureaucratic fiction. Severe fuel shortages grounded most operational aircraft. Experienced pilots were either dead or captured, and airfields lay as cratered ruins. Even where aircraft and fuel could be found, German pilots faced an impossible equation. Attacking meant confronting P-47 formations that commanded every altitude from ground level to 40,000 feet. Feldwebel Klaus Bretschneider, one of the last pilots trained in the desperate final months of 1945, flew exactly one combat mission before the war's end. His encounter with P-47s over Leipzig lasted a mere 12 seconds. I saw them diving from above for Thunderbolts in perfect formation, he recalled. I tried to turn, but they were too fast. The leader fired from 500 meters. My aircraft shook as if hit by sledgehammers. The engine exploded, the wings separated, and Bretschneider barely escaped. Suspended beneath his parachute, he watched in horror as the Thunderbolts destroyed his entire staff. 6 fighters obliterated in under a minute. The sky rained burning aluminum and bodies. The psychological impact was absolute. German medical officers documented a phenomenon known as Jabot fever, physical symptoms of stress and collapse appearing whenever the Thunderbolts were reported in the area. Veterans who had faced the challenges of Spitfires and Hurricanes without fear became paralyzed by the sheer material dominance of the P-47. It was a sound that instilled visceral fear. Pilots who were tasked with engaging the P-47 Thunderbolt often reported feeling physically ill before missions, knowing the sheer brutality of the aircraft they were hunting. On the ground, the distinctive, deafening thunder approaching P-47s became synonymous with impending doom, causing immediate panic among infantry and armored crews who understood that survival hinged on finding instantaneous cover. The final, staggering statistics of P-47 operations stand as a testament to industrial and tactical dominance, creating a tally sheet of destruction that defied comprehension. Across the European theater of operations, ETO, the Thunderbolt accounted for confirmed destruction of 3,752 German aircraft in aerial combat, and a further 3,315 aircraft destroyed on the ground. The systematic dismantling of the Reich's infrastructure was equally thorough. 86,000 railway cars, 9,000 locomotives, 6,000 armored fighting vehicles, 68,000 trucks, and 60,000 horse-drawn vehicles were eradicated. The Pacific Theater, PTO, saw comparable results against the Japanese war machine. 697 aircraft destroyed in the air, 150 on the ground, 1,500 vehicles, and 150 locomotives, alongside countless barges, ships, and critical installations. The scale of operational commitment was immense. The U.S. 9th Air Force alone, which relied heavily on the P-47 as its primary fighter-bomber platform, executed 213,873 combat sorties. In the process, they delivered 120,000 tons of bombs, expended 135 million rounds of heavy machine gun ammunition, and launched 60,000 high-explosive rockets. These Thunderbolt units maintained an extraordinary 4.6 to 1 kill ratio in aerial engagements, all while recording the lowest loss rate of any Allied fighter-bomber used extensively in the conflict. This overwhelming statistical superiority came at a devastating human cost for the enemy. The German Luftwaffe lost approximately 28,000 pilots killed in combat against the Western Allied forces, many succumbing to the concentrated, unforgiving fire of American heavy machine guns. Each pilot loss represented years of specialized training that Germany, by 1944, could no longer replace. This resulted in a critical disparity. By the final months of the war, the average German fighter pilot possessed less than 30 hours of combat experience, while the average P-47 pilot boasted over 200 hours. The German intelligence apparatus itself documented the P-47's ascendancy. At the Luftwaffe interrogation center located at Oberursel, captured Allied pilots were routinely debriefed. Records seized in 1945 revealed the German High Command's continuously updated assessment of the Thunderbolt, a file that showed a complete and dramatic reversal of opinion over the course of the war. April 1943 * large, unmaneuverable fighter. Inferior to German types in all performance parameters except dive speed. Machine gun armament insufficient against cannon-armed fighters. Assessment minimal threat. December 1943 * exceptional high altitude performance. Extreme structural strength. Firepower increasingly problematic. Pilots showing improved tactics. Assessment. Significant threat above 25,000 feet June 1944 * dominant fighter bomber. Superior to all German types above 20,000 feet firepower, devastating against all target types. Structural strength makes shoot-down extremely difficult. Assessment. Critical threat at all altitudes. March 1945 * best fighter bomber of the war. Combination of firepower, durability, and performance unmatched. Pilot quality exceptional. Assessment. Unsurvivable in direct engagement. The legacy of the Thunderbolt persisted, reaching far beyond the war itself. In 1985, at a reunion of German and American fighter pilots held in Phoenix, Arizona, the veterans who had once faced the immense power of the P-47 were able to share their stories. Decades after cessation of hostilities, in the arid landscapes of Arizona, former adversaries convened in peace, offering a rare opportunity for objective reflection on the air war. When questioned about the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, General Lieutenant Adolf Galland, the former General der Jagdflieger, head of the Luftwaffe fighter arm, delivered an assessment that captured the profound transformation of aerial warfare. His recorded response was a stark admission. We made a terrible mistake in 1943. We saw this big, heavy fighter and laughed. We said the Americans don't understand air combat. They built a bomber and called a fighter. We were the ones who truly didn't understand. The error lay in judging the P-47 by European standards. The Americans had not attempted to replicate the nimble, lightly armed designs of the continent. Instead, they built an American fighter, a massive platform designed fundamentally around three principles: unparalleled production scalability, devastating firepower, and pilot survivability. In a grinding war of industrial attrition, the designers correctly theorized that the aircraft capable of absorbing immense punishment while consistently delivering a massive volume of accurate fire would ultimately prevail. Galland's full realization came only after the war. Flying a captured Thunderbolt, he recounted the experience. The power was incredible. It climbed like it was falling upward. The cockpit was comfortable, the visibility excellent, and the controls precise. It was a pilot's aircraft wrapped in armor. Yet, the true shock was industrial. America constructed over 15,000 of these complex machines while simultaneously prosecuting a two-ocean war. Each required an engine more complex and powerful than anything produced by the Reich. That staggering capacity, building complex fighters faster than Germany could produce simple ones, was a moment, Galland admitted, when he knew the Luftwaffe never stood a chance. The aircraft's signature feature, its 8.50 caliber machine guns, was feared by German pilots, who grimly nicknamed the sound of their firing Roosevelt's piano. This brute force engineering philosophy defined the P-47. Every component was overbuilt and overpowered, representing American industrial philosophy perfected. Unlimited resources backing uncompromising design. The wing spars, for instance, were engineered to support 40,000 pounds, nearly 3 times the aircraft's maximum loaded weight. The engine mount was designed to withstand 12 G-forces, and control cables were doubled throughout, often incorporating automatic backup systems for redundancy. The ammunition feed system itself was a marvel of complexity and reliability. 8 separate ammunition boxes, each housing 425 rounds, were fed through electric boost motors specifically designed to prevent jamming during high-G maneuvers. Furthermore, the guns were electrically heated to ensure continuous operation and prevent freezing at extreme altitudes. Each weapon possessed its own charging mechanism and could be individually synchronized. Crucially, the convergence could be adjusted by the pilot from 150 to 400 yards, optimizing the devastating effect for preferred engagement ranges. Though some German veterans maintained that the P-47 won solely through quantity, arguing that German fighters were technically superior but merely overwhelmed by sheer numbers, the comprehensive combat records refute this claim. In engagements where numerical parity was achieved, the heavy, durable P-47s consistently prevailed, proving that their machine gun armament, initially dismissed as inferior to cannon, was, in the final analysis, the more effective weapon in the unforgiving reality of air combat. Analysis of gun camera footage provided conclusive evidence demonstrating why high-explosive cannon shells, though individually more destructive, were ultimately less effective in the hands of the average pilot. Their limited ammunition, typically constrained to 120 to 200 rounds, coupled with a demanding requirement for precise aim, restricted their operational utility. The P-47's armament offered a vastly different solution: 8 synchronized .50 caliber machine guns that created a dense probability cloud of bullets, guaranteeing hits even when the pilot's aim was imperfect. At typical engagement ranges, a mere 2-second burst could saturate a fighter-sized target with at least 20 rounds, ensuring catastrophic structural failure and destruction. Crucially, the American ammunition itself was superior. The armor-piercing incendiary, API, rounds utilized a delayed-action fuse designed to ensure deep penetration before detonation, while the incendiary compound burned at a staggering 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, sufficient heat to instantly ignite the aluminum structure of enemy aircraft. In contrast, the heavier German 20mm shells often exploded prematurely upon surface contact, frequently resulting in spectacular but ultimately superficial damage. The P-47 Thunderbolt was and remains the heaviest single-engine piston fighter ever mass-produced. Its empty weight of 10,000 pounds exceeded the gross weight of some contemporary twin-engine fighters, and its engine generated more power than entire bomber formations deployed during the previous World War. Its concentrated firepower was equivalent to that delivered by a squad of infantry. Yet, this sophisticated instrument of destruction was manufactured by the thousands, flown into combat by young men barely out of high school, and maintained under brutal combat conditions by mechanics who learned their complex trade in a matter of weeks. The profound transformation of German opinion, from initial mockery to palpable terror, was completed in less than 2 years. In that brief window, the ungainly flying milk bottle became the most feared aircraft in the entire experience of the Luftwaffe. Veterans who had unflinchingly faced the formidable Spitfires, Hurricanes, and Soviet Yaks spoke of encounters with the P-47 in hushed tones decades after cessation of hostilities. At the United States Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio, a meticulously restored P-47D stands among other legendary fighters. Its official placard lists the detailed specifications and hard-won battle honors, but the true narrative is encapsulated in a small display case containing spent .50 caliber shells and a surviving strip of gun camera film that captures a Focke-Wulf 190 disintegrating instantaneously under fire. Beneath this exhibit is a chilling quote from an unnamed German pilot, taken from a 1945 interrogation report. "We laughed when we first saw them. Fat, ugly American fighters that couldn't turn, couldn't climb, couldn't fight. We stopped laughing when we realized they didn't need to turn or climb. They just pointed those guns at you and you ceased to exist. The laughter died with our comrades." The P-47 Thunderbolt entered combat in April 1943 as an object of derision and ended the war as a definitive instrument of annihilation. In the intervening period, the synchronized fury of 8 Browning machine guns fundamentally rewrote the rules of aerial warfare and buried the remnants of the Luftwaffe under an avalanche of overwhelming lead. By May 1945, the Thunder had definitively spoken, and the sky belonged unequivocally to America.